Hi there.
Hey.
Good
Hi,
evening.
Angela.
Oops. Oh, there's the agenda.
And Angela, are you anticipating that the next meeting will also be a Zoom meeting?
I think that's something we need to talk about as a group.
Okay,
Angela, is there, where on the agenda are we gonna be electing a new chair?
Well, I wasn't sure if there was going to be any nominations, so it was not on the one that was posted. However, any members can do that, I guess, at the end of the meeting if you want to, if we want to take that up, if we have a quorum, which
Okay.
it looks like we should. Oh, there's Steve. Katie Fellows is not able to join us, and John Anderson is not able to join us. So I think we're all here. That is going to be here. So if you want, I can get started. I have the agenda up. So I'm going to call the meeting to order. And I just wanted to start off by introducing, we do have a new member that got appointed by council. And Portia Hirschman is should be on your screen, and I can take this down if that would help. And I wanted to give Portia an opportunity, I guess, to introduce herself and maybe give her a little background, maybe how long you've lived in town, and what you're bringing, I guess, to the table a little bit would be helpful.
Okay. I've been in Scarborough about 8 years. I'm actually from East Booth Bay, Maine. But my father was a career naval officer, so we moved around a lot. Got my degree in construction engineering from Purdue and worked in construction for about 25 years, and various kinds of construction, but mostly small commercial buildings. And then I went to seminary and became an Episcopal priest. And while I was in parish ministry, I ended up building 3 new church buildings. So I can't seem to get away from that. But that's my interest primarily in the Transportation Committee is looking at what we're doing eventually for public transportation, but also enabling those people who are in need of affordable housing, how in the world they get to and from work from where they live, and how we make our community more diverse from that perspective. So that's where I am. Some of you already know me. I know Roger and Jennifer and Angela are all familiar with me.
We're pen pals, aren't we?
I've been an appearance. So thank you.
Well, that's good. No, I appreciate you joining the group. I think it's always good to add more voices and opinions. I think it's going to be a really good group. So thank you. The next thing we had, I did send out meeting minutes from the last meeting. and I didn't know if anybody had a chance and if anybody wanted to go through that exercise of voting in the meeting minutes. Let's see.
I actually forgot to read them.
Okay, so I mean, we can wait till next meeting if no one's read them. That's fine too.
And do you have a quorum?
We do at 4. Yep, and we have 5 members right now on.
Okay,
Steve Berg is not pictured. I assume he's there. Steve, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. We don't see you. That's why I wanted to point out. Yep.
yeah, I'm not sure if I'm a voting member, so,
I think our alternate is our empty spot at the moment. My understanding from Tody is that everyone on the committee right now is a voting member because I think our alternate position is vacant.
all right. So as a LURPIC representative, I'm considered a voting member?
Yes, and so is actually the counselor. Our council liaison is also a voting member.
All right, thank you for clearing that up.
Mhm.
So Alan's filling an empty slot. How's that make you feel?
Well, I'm taking Judy's spot. She was the LURPIC liaison to
Yep,
transportation, so.
okay. If you guys don't feel comfortable with that, we can hold off and do it the next meeting. That's fine too.
Yeah, I didn't read them yet either. So
Okay.
I would be in favor of next time.
Okay. Is everyone in agreement with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Maybe you could send them out again,
Yep, I can do that.
okay?
Yep.
Updated minutes.
Because I will, yeah, I was gonna send out this recording for, I know Katie and John both specifically requested it because they are very interested in this topic that we're talking about tonight with Eastern Trail. So I will send out a link to that with the meeting minutes again. How's that?
Great, thanks.
So with that, we do have a guest this evening. One of the things I know we've heard many times, this group has been asking for an update because obviously very big advocates for the Eastern Trail and the Close the Gap effort to try to get the Eastern Trail connected from South Portland through Scarborough. And this group very curious on where we're at with that. And we've had some delays with different things. So I thought it would be helpful to have HNTB, the design consultants, come in and kind of give us firsthand where we're at and maybe look ahead a little bit on schedule with that. That would be helpful. So Josh is here, and I don't know if you want to introduce yourself, Josh, to the group.
Sure. Good evening, and thanks for having me. Yeah, my name is Josh Oland. I'm a senior structural engineer over at HNTB. I've been there for just about 5 years. I've been in the industry about 15 years altogether. So I've been with this project probably about halfway through its overall development phase. So I've been working through the final design, getting all the details put together, dealing with right-of-way and environmental aspects, things like that. So I've had my head into the project for some time, and hopefully I can shed some light for everybody in terms of where we are and where we're heading and some of the bumps we've hit.
Great. Are you able to share your screen this evening or do you want me to?
Nope, I can do that. That's
Great. I'll leave
Go
it to
ahead.
you.
okay. Great. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, we'll just jump right into this. And given the small group, please feel free to interrupt if you have a question as I go through. That might make things a little bit easier. So tonight, I really just wanted to walk through, provide an overview of the entire project, just real high level. We'll take a look at some of what the trail sections are going to look like, what you might expect as you walk along this trail. We'll then do what I call a kind of a trail walkthrough. We'll give you a sense of what each of the different sections look like along the trail because they are very different. And then I'll talk about the current project status, and I'll mention some of the bumps we've hit and provide you with an overall estimated schedule of what we hope to see moving forward, because I do see the light at the end of the tunnel here. And then, of course, if there's more questions at the end, by all means. So as we look through this, this is just a real high-level overview of the trail itself. The trail path is shown in green and starts off at the left-hand side of the screen at the Nonesuch River, zigzags its way along the overall floodplain of the Nonesuch River, crosses through the Scarborough business and industrial areas, wraps around a pond, cuts through the woods, and ends up over at the Wainwright complex. You will notice tonight as I walk through some of these slides that I am using a slightly older trail alignment. The overall path that you see here is very, very close to the final details, and I'll point out a couple of the locations where we're deviating from this specific green line. So as we walk along that trail, I mentioned there's some very different sections along there. You saw we had a river section, an industrial section, a pond, some woods. It's going to feel very different as you walk along this trail. But for the most part, what you'll see as you walk along is a path that's 10 to 12 feet wide, either paved or lined with stone dust, which is that kind of fine gray aggregate that I'm sure you've seen on a lot of trails. Depending on what you run into for topography out there, you may not have any railings at all on the side of the trail, which is what you see in the upper left, or there might be railings on one or two sides of the trail if there's steep drop-offs or privacy concerns with landowners and mitigation concerns with wetlands. So I know these are just some black and white graphics, and I'm sure it's hard to conceptualize. So I did bring along a few slides to give examples of what this might look like. So here we see the trail, an example part of the trail going through some woods. You can see that the trees have been cleared back about 5 to 7 or 8 feet on each side of the trail and simply just revegetated with grass. This will be similar to a lot of the locations on this project as well, just perhaps not with the trees in every setting. You can see that the overall trail very much follows just the natural topography out there. We're not trying to create any sort of hills intentionally. We're trying to follow the natural ground. I also mentioned there's going to be some sections out there that are going to require railings along the side. It's a little bit difficult to see here, but on the other side of this fence, the ground itself drops off along the hillside, which can be dangerous for bicyclists, especially bicyclists coming in opposite directions that have to make a quick decision. So we want to make sure that they're protected from falling down. We also have a couple of roadway crossings on the project, so you might run into situations like this where you have bollards at each end of the trail to prevent vehicles from going on the trail. And on either side of that, you may or may not have some fencing and some timber guardrail, which you can barely see on the very edges of the screen here, kind of just down below the stop sign and on the opposite side of the trail. Again, for pedestrian safety as they're waiting to cross the road or taking a break from biking. Another similar look at a different roadway crossing. Again, you can see lots of advanced sign notifications for motorists driving along the road and protection for all. So that's kind of an overview of what the general sections will look like as you travel along this trail. And now I wanted to take that deeper dive and essentially walk through the trail with you to provide you an overview of what you might see. So here we're starting off right at the beginning of the project, which does abut an existing section of the Eastern Trail. It's kind of a dead end of the trail right at the Nonesuch River. And in this location, the trail is actually starting along an old railroad bed. And the benefit for the project in this case is that there's actually some old bridge supports out there, some old bridge abutments from when that railroad used to be active. The bridge itself is gone, but those supports are still there and are completely intact and look great. So we are planning to reuse those as an overall measure of getting across this river. We take a slightly different kind of bird's eye look at this location. On the upper left-hand side of the screen is that existing trail where the Eastern Trail currently dead ends. You can see it's nice and paved, clearly identifiable. As you cross over the river, you can see it's completely overgrown. That's where the old railroad bed used to be, and that's exactly where our trail is going to continue along. It's good material, just got to get rid of some of that vegetation to replace it with an actual rideable surface. You can also barely make out in the river itself some faint gray outlines of those abutments if you look really closely. And those are the abutments we're going to be using. And I have some example pictures of what that might look like as well. So it's not a very big crossing. The Nonesuch River crossing here is only about 35 feet long. And again, I've got some nice engineered graphics here, but really what's it going to look like? And here's an example of what we intend to see out there. The structure going across here is what we call a prefabricated steel truss. Basically, it's assembled and fabricated in a shop someplace off premises, and it's delivered to the project site almost exactly as you see here. Basically everything except for the timber boarding itself going across that decking. It arrives on the back of a truck, and then an excavator essentially pulls it off and drops it in place on abutments, very much like you see here today. You can see some stacked granite abutments or supports underneath that bridge. And just another example picture of what that might look like if you were to be looking from the side of the trail as it wraps around.
Where is that crossing that you just showed, out of curiosity?
This particular one, I would have to go back and look. I forget, unfortunately.
It looks very similar to the.
It is,
That's why I
yes.
was asking.
Yep, it is
Is-
very similar, and I believe it's along the Eastern Trail. I want to say down in Biddeford.
Is that about the same scale as far as the distance, the length of the crossing? Is that similar?
Yep, it's similar. This one that we see here is a little bit longer. I would say this one's about 50 feet long.
Okay.
So a little bit longer and a little bit taller off the water, although it depends what time of day, because the Nonesuch River is slightly influenced by tidal fluctuations. Very slow moving, but slightly influenced. We will be going out there and putting a concrete cap on top of those abutments, simply to level things off and make it easier for that bridge to be dropped in. Moving along here, kind of back to the beginning of the trail, I mentioned we're going across on an old rail bed, and then as we get to the top of the screen, you can see the trail hooks and comes back down kind of at a diagonal down to the lower right. In this general section, we're hugging the edges of the overall floodplain of that river. And it's a fine line to walk through here, balancing wetland impacts, flood zone impacts, private property impacts, and really trying to maximize potential growth of the businesses you see in the upper right of the screen. So we're very much walking a fine line through here and still working, in fact, with some of the private owners to fine tune this even just in a matter of feet to get this in the right location. As you work your way along that down to the lower right, you see another hook in the trail. And this is where we enter the CMP corridor. And it hooks quite drastically because we've been asked by CMP to stay on their northern edge of their overall right-of-way boundary. And as we enter that, we hook into it from the left-hand side of the screen. We come into that CMP corridor and immediately we run into a railroad. And this is probably the most congested and costly part of the trail overall, because we have to cross over this railroad track, over all the railroad cars that come through here. It's not an at-grade crossing, it's another bridge.
Mhm.
So if we take a look forward here, we see that there's a number of rail tracks through here. You can see that there's two primary tracks going from top to bottom. And then there's a couple of sidings or side tracks off to the side there that kind of create a Y. One wraps around the back edge of a building and one just ties back in. Both those currently are essentially abandoned, but the railroad likes to retain the rights to do something in the future if they want to. So we still have to cross over them and treat them like real tracks. You also see the CMP overhead lines through here. These are extremely high voltage lines, not just the typical ones along a roadway. And then you see a bunch of trees and a building. And we are threading the needle between the electric lines on the top half of the screen and the trees in the building. That's our little boxed in zone to get the trail up and over the railroad track. So it's a very difficult place, once again, requiring a bridge. And in this case, it's a little bit longer. Again, a nice engineered graphic, something that'll be in the plans for the contractor to build from. And once again, this will be a prefabricated steel truss, something that can be delivered to the project site so that way the trail can be built quicker, cheaper, and really in between a lot of constraints we're dealing with, both in terms of those power lines and buildings and everything. But on top of that, we also have other constraints dealing with the overhead lines. We are going to be putting up the steel structure in close proximity to those power lines, which means the power lines actually need to be depowered temporarily for us to do that activity. And there's very specific times of the year that we're allowed to actually kill the power to those power lines. So this is one of the other constraints that we've been working through both with CMP very cooperatively to figure out when that can happen and how it can happen. So again, what'll it look like? This one's a little bit harder to find some example photos of, but I did find one that was pretty close. Overall, I mentioned it will be another prefabricated steel truss, but in this case, because of the overall bridge length we're talking about, the sides of that truss will be a little bit taller and it'll actually have a top to it. So it's essentially walking through a big box. And on the sides of that are going to be some chain link fence or some other mesh to prevent people from actually throwing things onto the railroad tracks, littering, things like that. And that's very common for crossing railroads. So from the inside, you might see something like this, although I can't guarantee you'll see nice tall pine trees like this going down, down through the industrial area. So we come up over the railroad tracks over on the left-hand side of the screen, 23 feet in the air to get over those tracks, and immediately start coming straight back down a trail and have to cross Parkway Drive at grade. So it's a very steep hill to go up and over those tracks and back down. Once we get to Parkway Drive, we have the typical guardrail, sign package, things like that that I showed you a picture of earlier. We then cross Parkway Drive and we go through the CMP corridor, which is a lot of different brush conditions going through the back edge of these buildings. And then we make our way over to Pleasant Hill Road, which is really the next segment of our trail section going from Pleasant Hill and up around the pond. Pleasant Hill Road, as I'm sure you are all aware, is a very busy road, and we're crossing it right along a curve, right in this generalized area. This is another place where we negotiated with some property owners and CMP, and we actually pulled the trail away from their northern edge of their right of way down between the two power lines to cross at a slightly better location with some better visibility. And recognizing the high traffic speeds, the curve in the road, and pedestrian safety, we're putting in a quite extensive sign package here and some flashing beacons to warn vehicles of pedestrians crossing at this location. We then cross through that. We continue along the CMP corridor for a little while, and here's one of those locations where the trail deviates from what has been discussed in the past. So we have the yellow trail that was the original concept, but just right about where it says CMP, you can see a green line deviates and goes down by the pond and hugs the pond a lot closer. That was an intentional decision that we made discussing constraints with CMP and really trying to better align the project with its overall goals of providing a nice scenic view along the trail. So we're hugging the pond for a better view and getting away from that massive CMP substation that's out there that would have been riddled with a lot of different constraints and hurdles to get through. So we're moving away from that, hugging the pond, and things are better for everyone. We then continue, oops, I got a view of the pond as well, just in case. You can see one of the other reasons here a little bit clearer. There's a trail along the edge of the pond. It's actually not a trail, it's a maintenance road for the golf range over on Pleasant Hill. But we're reusing part of this roadway network simply to cut down costs and reduce impacts altogether. So as we work our way along this trail, which wraps all the way around the pond, you can see that it meets up with another driveway up on the upper right-hand side of the screen. This is where we cross over a private drive, which is partially owned by a private land developer, as well as the Portland Water District. And we start to cross through a series of woods and man-made ditches that were built 50, 60 years ago. So this is where we start to see a lot more trees. It's a lot more private setting, and a lot more like that first trail section that I showed you a picture of. This last little image here as we enter the Wainwright complex, this is another location where we had to deviate from the original trail plan. We were cutting across the corner of a private parcel to reduce wetland impacts and to reduce the number of ditches to cross. And these ditches aren't huge. They're anywhere from 8 to 15, maybe 20 feet wide. They're going to be crossed with some timber bridges. But we were trying to go through there for overall betterment. However, discussions with landowners and so forth pushed us to stay within a utility corridor as long as possible before making a turn up into the Wainwright complex. It's not a big difference. I think it added one little timber bridge, but in the end, it made the landowner happy. Once we get up to the Wainwright complex, we simply follow the sidewalk around, and we are then across the driveway entrance from continuing on with the Eastern Trail once again. And this is just, again, a bird's eye view of what this overall area looks like. And again, you can see numerous ditches throughout this overall area, likely trying to dry the land at one point. So that's the overview of the project and the trail walkthrough. So where are we? I mentioned this project has been active since, I believe, 2011 or 2012, trying to find the right alignment, trying to move it along. I can say at this time, from a design perspective, from a building a contract for a contractor to work with, we're 98% of the way there. We've delivered what we call a 98% milestone and received comments from the town and the Department of Transportation. We have those handful of comments to correct and it updates some different contractual agreements for the contractor, but we're essentially there in terms of actually figuring out what the trail is. The bigger hurdles are more on all the behind the scenes permitting and negotiations. We have received our draft environmental permits, meaning the Maine DEP and the Army Corps of Engineers both agree to the impacts and the feasibility of the trail, and we've been able to move forward. However, we're not allowed to get final permits until we've secured all right-of-way for the trail, meaning all easements, license agreements, etc. We are, as I also mentioned, going through and negotiating small changes to the trail with a couple landowners, which means we're going to have to cycle back through the environmental permit application one more time to discuss changes with those permitting agencies. We are currently really focused, however, on right-of-way negotiations. We've gone through and we've done an appraisal of the impacted lands. We've made offers to the landowners, and now we're in that position where we are negotiating to try to find an agreement to be able to construct the trail and move forward. There are a couple of the I'll say, private utilities, CMP and Portland Water District, that we're actually in the midst of preparing and executing agreements. We've come to terms and we're moving forward. So it is positive. We do have some counter offers from the different landowners out there as well. So we are working through all of that. So what does that mean in terms of schedule? Well, as I mentioned, I do see the light at the end of the tunnel. I am hopeful that this is all going to advance. We are currently targeting wrapping up all the right-of-way negotiations, recording easements, finishing the last little 2% of design, and getting those permits in hand to construct the trail and put this project out for advertisement later this year. Once that's advertised, it's going to be about 18 to 24 months worth of construction, really dependent on some of those power outages we're allowed to do to put that bridge in place. It really comes down to these 6 months. It's basically a 2-week window when we can put those bridges up, and they occur both in the spring and fall timeframe. So just depending on when those can happen, it really drives the overall construction of this project. The overall goal here, though, is to have the trail open in late 2023. So about 2.5 years from now is the goal. And with that, I'm going to leave it open for any questions you may have, whether it's a part of the trail, a process, whatever it might be. I'll do my best to answer. Portia?
Josh, I know that there are flashing lights at various road crossings. Is the intent to have those flashing lights at every major road crossing, or just simply at places where there's fast traffic?
I believe right now the only place we're looking at a flashing beacon is on Pleasant Hill Road.
Okay.
So the crossings we have are Parkway Drive, which is, it's a private drive, but it is an industrial drive that does have some traffic on it, though much less significant and slower speeds. And then we have Pleasant Hill Road and just that private drive that's kind of partially owned by Portland Water District in that industrial area. That's 1 or 2 cars a day and moving at 10 miles an hour.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm curious if there will be any views of the river beyond the initial bridge crossing that you talked about at the beginning, sort of along the stretch where you were talking about the trail following the high water mark?
Of course. Yep. So this is probably just as good as any. Once you make this hook around the Nonesuch River, it's a little bit difficult to see, but you can see a little bit of shading of green in here for some
Mhm.
trees. There's going to be pockets where there's some thin trees between the trail and the river, and then there's going to be other areas where you're walking along and it's just some open brush, and you'll be able to see the river. And again, depending on how high the water is at the time you're crossing, it's going to be more or less visible.
Cool. I think that's really like a really unique piece about this stretch of the trail versus some of the other segments that are already in place.
Good. I think it'll be nice as well.
Josh, on that screen that's up right there right now, what is between the proposed trail design, location and the river? Is it marshy?
It is. It's marshy, and it's what's called the floodplain or the flood zone. So any sort of fill that we put into this flood zone, any sort of building up of the trail to keep dry, can impact floodwaters and push that floodwater onto other people's property. So we're not allowed to impact it. It's a very sensitive area. So between just the natural wetlands and things like that out there, like I said, it's also pushing water around. So we're not allowed to get into it.
Okay. The other question I had, I was thinking about when you were describing the bridges. Was there ever any consideration given to the work that UMaine is doing with their the fiber design bridges? Or maybe it's not
honestly,
not yet available.
Nope, they are. They market a handful of different types, whether it's directly through UMaine or through a kind of a spin-off company of graduates that have come out of there. There's a number of systems, and it's not one that we specifically looked at on this project. It's something we can do. Typically, however, steel trusses tend to be the most cost efficient. The businesses have been around for quite a while. They know what they're doing, and they're very competitive with one another. So it's not to say we can't do it. I think it's a great idea to look into. That's just how we approached it when we first started this.
It might be wise to look at an alternative steel structure for the bridge that crosses the railroad tracks that has the high voltage, excuse me, my allergies are bad, high voltage lines in the event that a storm would knock those lines down. If you knock them down on a steel bridge, you're going to have an activated bridge.
Yes. So to that point, and this view that I have here on screen really doesn't do it justice because of how you're looking at it at quite an angle. When the bridge is in its final condition, the closest power line will be a little bit over 20 feet away from it laterally. So it's going to be quite the swing for it to end up hitting the bridge. But on top of that, we've been working with CMP to make sure that bridge is grounded.
Okay.
So it won't create shocks. The whole reason we have to kill the power during construction is because we have cranes that are going to be sticking up in the air. And for the same reason you're kind of thinking, if those cranes tip over and hit the lines, then that's going to be a major problem. Alan?
Josh, in relationship to that railroad bridge that we were just talking about, I believe that earlier on in the project, there was some concern with local abutters regarding the right of way that was required and that there might have been issues. Are those all resolved now?
Essentially, yes. The issues with those landowners, we are no longer impacting their right of way whatsoever. And conveniently, actually, I mentioned there's a private drive through this area just off to the right-hand side of the screen that crosses the CMP corridor. CMP has actually worked with us to help restore some easement language with that property owner as a benefit to the project and help things move forward. So those concerns have been addressed.
Okay, thank you.
How much is it going to cost?
Yep. So that's something we were actually just looking at again the other day. Costs as an industry have been going up over the last couple of years, driven by a number of factors, but they seem to be catching up to us with a lot of the kind of the pandemic issues that have been happening. I'm sure everybody's heard about timber prices going through the roof. You know, most people can't even go to Home Depot and find pressure treated lumber to build a deck. We have the same issue with structural steel at the moment. The mills seem to be behind. So the prices have been creeping up, but right now we're looking at an estimated construction cost for the overall project of about 3.8 million.
How much was it?
3.8 million.
Okay.
And the overall trail is about 1.6 miles long.
Have the funds been secured?
The funds have been secured. We are trying to actively get the project out this year. Otherwise, funding might be redispersed to other projects until this project can actually get the negotiations in place. It's not that they're going to go away forever, just redispersed and temporarily paused. And it is a combination of town, state, and federal funds to get this project moving forward.
And I guess I mentioned, my understanding too is that DOT has been very supportive of this project and kind of helping
Very.
this along and keeping this moving. So I'm sure pausing it is not what anybody wants to do. But
Nope. And yeah, the DOT's been very cooperative. We talk to them at least once a month, if not every other week, just getting their support with some of these very tricky right-of-way constraints where it's mostly private land or utility land with multiple easements on top of each other. So trying to figure out who owns the land and who's supposed to receive payment for us putting a trail there has been very tricky and has been actually one of the sticking points to us being able to move forward. Is just simply trying to identify who we need to reach out to and negotiate with. Been very problematic.
And I'm not sure how many members here are aware of kind of what kind of process the town took on. We're doing it as a locally administered project. So we're kind of taking on the responsibility to get this project moving, designed into construction. Whereas rather than having the DOT be the lead, it's the town. And I guess, Josh, if maybe you could speak to this, it's my understanding is this is one of or the largest kind of LAP projects. I mean, this is a pretty complicated one, and for us to take on
It is. Yeah, it's not the longest one. I mentioned it's only about 1.6 miles, which, you know, it's still a good length, but not in relation to some of the other ones that are being thought through right now. They're 6 or 7 or 8 miles long. But it does have 2 bridges. One, this one here that we see on screen going over the railroad tracks being the most complex, I'd say, probably on the trail system for quite a number of miles. It is quite the magnitude. It does have very difficult right-of-way negotiations between utility corridors, railroads, private owners, industrial areas, and a bunch of muddy easements, I'll say, that are out there. So it is very complicated, very complex. And one of the reasons I mentioned the DOT may have to redisperse funds is because they have a whole bunch of other small trail and sidewalk projects out there that, for the most part, their average trail project length that they do is a couple thousand feet, you know, cutting through woods from a school to a recreation field, things like that. So when you start talking about 1.6 miles of funds that are tied up, that's just where they're coming from. And again, they're very interested in getting this done. They're very cooperative. It's at a highlight of their work plan. If you ever look at that on their official website, they very much want to see this through.
I saw it on the work plan and I got so excited.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, at the commissioner level, they are all trying to get this pushed through. So they're very helpful.
What website did you see this on, Jen?
Well, if you're in the biz, you know, the DOT's work plan is the highlight of any January. You know, we sit and twiddle our thumbs. Christmas, New Year's can come and go, but man, when that work plan comes out, I'm kidding. It's pretty long, but the DOT, you can find it on that's what it's referred to as work plan. So if you just searched for Maine DOT work plan, it's usually, I think they do it in 3-year increments. And they even have saved all of us from having to sort through 25 pages or 40 pages, however long it is, of PDFs, and you can now search by like your community, or you can search by type of project. So this would come up as a multimodal, I think, or a trail project. So anyway, it's a fun, nerdy way to see where DOT is coming close to you and what type of work.
Oh, well, for those of us not in the biz, I think this is a great presentation. And I was going to actually suggest, Angela, if you could somehow put this on the town's website.
Yeah.
You know, Josh's presentation, because I could almost guarantee you most people in town have no idea what's involved in this whole thing. And occasionally people say, well, what's going on with the Eastern Trail, you know, and you get blank stares, you know. So I think this is a terrific, informative presentation.
Yeah, so this will go up under the Transportation Committee page under our meetings, so we can.
Yeah, but somebody, the public has to know to go, that they don't even know we're talking about this probably, you know?
And I think as we get closer, Roger, I think what's happening now, like I said, it's been, I think every time we kept asking for an update, the answer was we're in right of way. And so there's really not a good story to say, here's where we're at. We're still at right of way. But my hope is that we, as Josh said, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and once we get through the right of way piece, which it sounds like there's maybe an end in sight, that, to your point, is having a bigger kind of push out to the public, as far as we have a really great, forgive me, I'm going to mess up her title, communication coordinator for the town now, that does wonderful things through our social media and through our website, as well as the leader and things like that. So Allison's a great resource. And so once we know and have more information to be able to, like, okay, we have dates now and we're moving this forward. And that I really see is around us going out to bid and knowing that we have dates and this is a real thing that's happening, and we have some timelines that we can kind of throw out there. Because I think we have been talking about it for years, and now people are like, oh, okay, so that we're still at right away. So, and to Josh's credit though, you can see now, it's nice to see the status, because to be at 98% design, I mean, there's a lot of other things that happened while we're still at right away, right? So it's looking like all the other pieces are kind of coming together, so that once we get through that hurdle, and I guess correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but that's where I guess I'm seeing it, is all the other pieces are kind of lining up while we're through that, right?
Correct. Once we get through the negotiations and get some final sign off from the landowners, the rest of the pieces should fall into place, because the design's all wrapped up. The permitting agencies have agreed to the project. It's just finalizing those permits. And those are really the three big things: design, right of way, and environmental on this project.
And I guess I had a question about the environmental piece too, because we were talking about trying to put this out to bid and the timing of that. Is there other constraints as far as what time of year you can do just certain activities and all of that?
There sure are. The biggest one being impacts to streams. So over at the Nonesuch River, we're really not touching the river. We have those abutments in place, and we can drop a new bridge in and we don't get wet. However, on this end of the project of the Wainwright complex, several of these man-made ditches that have been here for so long are now considered streams. So these have in-water work windows, which is a term the environmental agencies use. And basically it's a time frame in which you are allowed to be in the water and do construction adjacent to it, and a time frame when you're not allowed to. And I forget the exact timing of what we're allowed here at this site, but it's something along the lines of end of June to beginning of October. That's when we're allowed to do something right at the water. So it's another constraint that we have to work around, which again, depending on when we advertise the project and when a contractor can really get their boots on the ground, can play into how long the construction will actually take. Alan?
Question for both Josh and Angela. From the town's is there anything that you need from the town's perspective? From either a zoning perspective or ordinance perspective, that needs to be changed in order for this project to proceed?
I don't believe so. That not to my knowledge. I know Tom Hall's been attending these meetings as well and helping out to push some of these negotiations along and really wants to see this through as well. So he's been offering support, but I haven't heard of any zoning changes that are needed.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any, and I know earlier in the process, council was very much involved in trying to shepherd this project forward as well. And like I think Josh had mentioned, with town funds helping supporting that too, that was from a previous council. So it has been through a public process, which we didn't really touch on probably at the beginning of this, was the public process piece, which now is getting dated. So to Roger's point, it is time to kind of get that back out in the public, being aware of what's happening.
Yeah,
as we move forward.
I didn't know if there was anything specifically required in the industrial zone that could have any conflict whatsoever with what's going on here, because only if it was, obviously it's something that I would take the LURPIC and see if we couldn't start noodling to try to get whatever we need so that it's done in plenty of time. And Josh, LURPIC is Long Range Planning Committee
Thank
here
you.
in town.
Thank you.
I have a question, just general information. The Eastern Trail, where did that terminate? Did that go right into like the South Portland yards, or where did that go ultimately? Anybody know?
Goes all the way to Portland.
Doesn't it go to Bug Light?
Yes, and
No, I mean the railroad, the original railroad,
Oh,
the original railroad, which is over there by the manufactured homes. Eastern Trail, where did that ultimately end up?
It must have gone through Rigby Yard in South Portland, and then there is the rail bed goes continues through South Portland into Jen's Point. It crosses over the Amtrak station and all of that into South Portland. There's lines that go and spur off like along Commercial Street even. So I think it stands out in different locations, right? Different rail lines.
yeah, there's the active lines there that go from Rigby Yard over the river and then towards like where the Amtrak station is now. And then there's there's a junction right there. So, and then the older alignment heads over like where the old Union Station used to be in Portland, and it wraps around behind Hadlock Field and then over towards the bridge that you see from Tukey's Bridge that's not used anymore. So that's all not abandoned because the road company still own it, but inactive rail corridor on that side. But then obviously where the Amtrak's still active, and there's freight lines over there too.
Yeah, well, it also continues on and eventually gets to Brunswick and beyond.
Yeah, the rail networks for Maine are really interesting, I think, to me anyway. It's pretty cool which pieces are still connected. And while, to Josh's point about they basically having to double the width of the bridge necessary here to span those two other side tracks, you can kind of, that's kind of a hot topic these days, right? Like how much of rail lines do we keep for maybe kind of someday, maybe there's train activity on them again, or are they more valuable in being converted over to some of these rail trail projects? This one, the full alignment for this section, obviously there's no, actually, are there rails in there anymore?
two of the active rails, yes. Amtrak comes through here and goes to the Portland station.
I mean, sorry, I mean, like, so once you've put in the new bridge over the Nonesuch and where you're laying the new trail along older rail corridor, even before that.
Oh, going south of that, no, there's nothing there for quite a ways.
No rails in there, yeah.
No,
So it's just the land.
correct.
Yeah.
Correct, yeah, CMP actually took that over as part of their property almost a century ago.
Cool, that makes it easier.
See, the thing that's interesting, Angela, is I've read the pieces occasionally, like in the Leader, about what's going on, but it's easy to forget all this stuff. But to the best of my recollection, the biggest issue was always the bridge over the Nonesuch. And that doesn't seem to be as much of a problem as the bridge over the railroad tracks, which I was not even aware of. So.
Yeah, the one over the Nonesuch is it's quite simple. And
Yeah.
it's, got some little challenges here to make sure it's in place correctly. But yeah, the one over the railroad tracks is quite the challenge to make sure it's
Yeah.
put up and timed correctly.
Yeah.
It's like the ultimate 4D project.
Yeah, I'm sure some contractors will be asking questions about it. It can be tough.
And I had one more question about, is there any other trailhead parking? Is there any spaces being allocated around like Pleasant Hill or anything like that?
No, nothing specific. So obviously the Wainwright complex is kind of the big one. There's no official parking. I was trying to see if I had a slightly better view. I don't. I'll say there's some parking spaces over in this general area where the trail is currently shown to cross, but we're actually zigzagging a tiny bit in here. It's within CMP's corridor, kind of along the edge of the road, a big gravel area. I'm sure informally somebody could park there temporarily, but it's certainly not signed as such or planned as such.
Has anyone had any conversations with Hannaford about maybe allocating some of their parking lot for public sharing? I drive by there twice a day, and honestly, they just have a fraction of the people parking there now that they did
Right.
once before. And I don't know their business plan enough to know if they're going to bring everybody back or not. But it also just kind of seems like, particularly for a big business like that with such a large parking lot, even if they were made available outside of business hours or something, that would be, seems like it would be such a great.
That's actually McBrady property, Jennifer. So that's the group that owns a big chunk of land in that area. So.
Correct. They actually own Parkway Drive, which is the private road that CMP helped us with.
Yep.
So I'm not sure how open they would be to be having additional people come up the road and park there. I do hear that Hannaford has been very supportive of the trail. They're looking forward to having their employees be able to go out at lunchtime and take a walk.
Sure.
Yeah, we haven't broached the subject about getting additional trailhead parking there.
And I guess I would just point out too, as we have a couple planning board members here too, that as projects do come through, maybe in the area too, that is something that can be a conversation during planning board review and design. I know that was an integral part of when Saco was doing the trail. We had different businesses that were willing to work with the Eastern Trail Alliance and looking for just, I know like the RV sales in Saco has like 2 or 3 spaces they have designated for trail, or the Subaru dealership. There's different places along the stretch. So those are things that came out during a planning board discussion. And like you said, there's a lot of businesses that are really supportive and just need to be asked, and it could be part of a bigger process.
I mean, you certainly, they could do it informally. My guess is even under the guise of being a tenant. So if they're a tenant to that land, but they're managing the parking lot for their own employees, you know, there would be the opportunity to just put up a couple different signs or something like that. And also that even if that doesn't happen in a formal way, it probably, you know, it's hard to believe that the heaviest use on this trail would be, you know, Monday through Friday from 7 to 4. It's probably going to be a Saturday morning if I had to guess. But yeah, that is a good point, Angela, particularly because I know that this committee, at a minimum, we've discussed parking issues at the other trailheads along the Eastern Trail, you know, on off of Black Point Road, and I don't know if we've talked about Pine Point Road, but that one's not much better. It's very busy all the time. And my guess is that I'm going to get the street names wrong, but basically the entrance to, there's a little bit of parking. What's the road that goes, Portland Farms Road that goes down behind Lois's, where you would access the part of the trail that Josh showed initially here. That kind of dead ends. I know my family, my kids are little and they ride their bikes at like 1 mile an hour. So when we go to ride on the trail, that's where we go. Because it's a dead end. So it doesn't, you know, it's not as heavily used, but as soon as that's connected, I would imagine that more people would be looking for access there as well. So, you know, I don't think any of these points of access, you know, we shouldn't need and we shouldn't be looking for a big 50 space parking area, but like Angela was saying, you know, if we can partner with businesses to share 1 or 2 spaces here, 3 or 4 spaces there, particularly at times where they don't they're not in as high demand for the business itself, then I just think that's like,
So will this get done before Route 1 gets fixed?
I don't know. I didn't hear anything about Route 1.
Back to Jennifer's point on the parking. I live along near the Eastern Trail, and on weekends at the Black Point parking lot, there are often cars parked on, you know, 1 or 2 sides of the road, as well as the parking lots being full. So whether you plan for parking or not, people are going to figure out where they're going to park. So having a thought about it beforehand, I think is certainly a reasonable plan.
Yeah, and actually the Pine Point Road parking, that trailhead is actually part of this year's, I think it's one of the CIPs from Community Services. And I believe the department had mentioned that it was one of their busiest parking lots because they're looking at trying to maybe pave it because they have to spend so much money trying to the upkeep in that lot just because of the usage and the turnover and things like that. So it will be interesting to see. I know it seemed like with the pandemic ran, a lot of more people were out and about in the spring and in fall, probably more so than typical. And it'll be interesting to see maybe, and I don't know where, I'll have to think about this and maybe Jen can help me out, but trying to figure out maybe some counts. I'm kind of curious of when this does make that connection. And I don't know if Josh, if you guys have talked about that at all, about the increase in bike and in ped traffic along the corridor just by closing that gap, because right now there is those dead ends, and having that ability to go from Wainwright, you know, into Saco, you know.
Are there counts? There must be counts. Somebody must have counts on the current sections. I know PAX used to do bike counts, but my guess is
they are
don't anymore.
updating. Well, they are talking about doing an update, and so that's where I was probably going to reach out to them and see. And I know they work probably closely with Eastern Trail Alliance to try to look at different sections where they, you know, want to invest their money that way. So it'd be interesting to see, because I know we've also, which Portia's probably aware of too, at Black Point Road crossing, that rapid flashing beacon just is a busy intersection as well with traffic, has become a high crash location. And I think it has a combination of trying to figure out what you do when a light is flashing for some reason as you're coming down that hill, and you panic and slam on a brake, or what do you do? And there's a lot of, left turning traffic and things like that. And so that combination, I'm just curious if now the lights flashing more often and things like that. And we might have to revisit with this group some of these crossings again, Pleasant Hill Road and Black Point and maybe others. So it's good to keep an eye on these locations. And so I'm sure we'll have more conversations with this group.
There was actually a good traffic calming accomplished at that intersection. By adding that sidewalk and kind of eliminating the ability to go around a vehicle heading southbound on Black Point. So that actually created a calming effect, which I think has helped that intersection greatly.
You're obviously at 98% design, so you don't want to hear any more about things like that. But I think
No, we do.
there's a similar consideration for reduction of lane widths at that Pleasant Hill crossing would probably go a long way too, because I know that right now it's easy for people, there's no curbing there, I don't think. And so it's easy for people, a lot of times, particularly right on that corner, there'll be like large tractor trailers or, not to point fingers, but I've seen like town pickup with a flatbed trailer and mowers on it, pulled over getting a coffee and a sandwich at the convenience store there, but they're not using the parking lot because their vehicles are large, and so they're staging sort of right in the shoulder there, which is, up until pretty recently has been very much appropriate, or commonplace on Pleasant Hill Road, because it doesn't see a lot of bike or
There may be a
use.
need for some no parking signage near that crossway.
Yeah, I wrote that down as we were talking here. I think that'll be important for visibility. Certainly safety is a high priority. So if something like adding a little bit of curbing in or pushing the guardrail out a little bit further to kind of have a calming effect, anything we can do like that to improve safety, I think we can still accommodate quite easily.
Yeah, and I think even once we get this constructed, again, there's groups like this, I feel like we can talk about those type of things, that we can augment certain things in a local level as well, because we're not going to think of everything, right? So like I said, it might be a longer process. Like we said, we have to be patient and wait till things come in front of the planning board, or we see once it's built, here's some things we hadn't thought of, and that like we can look at where no parking signs need to go and things like that, because maybe we're thinking an area and it ends up we see issues somewhere else. And so I think that's where this group is usually pretty helpful with those type of things.
Mike lives for those opportunities, Angela.
Angela, I'm curious, looking further afield, who maintains this? Like Josh, you showed some photos of really nice, like brand new split rail fence, and I don't know why, but my brain just thought like, wow, what happens when those are rotted and falling down? Like, who comes back to repair a fence if a tree falls on it, or there's a pothole in the trail surface or something like that? Is it DOT? Is it Eastern Trail Alliance, or is it the town, or nobody, everybody?
Well, I can say that community services takes on a big role there. And I know they were just talking about maybe replacing some of the planks or something on some of the other crossings. And I think working closely with ETA. So the Eastern Trail Alliance has a big pool of obviously volunteers, but they don't have the resources. So it really, I think, and Josh, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's been my experience, is that they will, be the ones that usually flag it because they have the members, they know what's happening out there and can flag safety issues, or like you said, a tree comes down. I know we had a major erosion issue in the section in Saco where we had to have Public Works come in, but it was really coordinating through Eastern Trail Alliance, because like I said, if we, can supply materials, I think they usually can supply some volunteers for minor things. But the major construction pieces, the town is signing on. When we partner with this, the town is signing on for that maintenance. And I know we do work collaboratively. There's staff member from Scarborough then that does attend Eastern Trail Alliance meetings and things like that. So we talk about all those type of things and how the sharing some resources in that respect too, I think. That's my understanding.
Same.
But DOT, yes, is once once it's constructed, they're
out.
They're done.
I know.
But that's fine. I mean, that's what we've been, advocating for, is to get to this point, right?
Yeah.
This for our residents. So
Cool. I just think we're so lucky to have this parts of this in place, this piece to be, that's been in the works. Scarborough is super unique in a lot of different, many different ways. But this is just like such a really unique amenity, I think, to be able to have running pretty much top to bottom through our town, and then to have partners that are willing to be good stewards and help keep an eye on it, like the Eastern Trail Alliance, and just doing what they can to, their fundraising efforts. I know, at least on this part, we're very helpful too.
is there any other questions for Josh? Well, thank you for putting this together
Of course.
in pretty short notice. So I gave you a month or so, but I really appreciate you taking that time, because this has been a project that's been long coming and has had some gaps along the way as far as information getting out. So I think this is helpful to get this, at least re-engage this group, and then we can be a resource to try to pump out some information to the public as we move forward. I think that would be good.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the time, everybody. And certainly if you have any other questions, please let me know. You can follow up through email or whatever else might be easiest. So
Okay, thank you.
appreciate it.
Enjoy
Bye.
the rest of your evening.
You too. Thanks. Bye.
The next thing, we always give an opportunity for the public comment, and I am not seeing any members of the public that joined us. So is there any member comments or anything you want to voice anything?
Yeah, okay.
Just go ahead, Roger.
No, you go, Jen.
I was just going to add that I a number of times, which is kind of strange because I feel like maybe I've never touted this committee before in my own circles, but I've offered this knowing that we do often have public opportunity for public comment, but it just seems that I've heard recently of a couple of different people in a couple of different neighborhoods. It's not even just one neighborhood, where people are concerned or frustrated with overall speeding and just traffic concerns. Overall speeding is pretty much the big one, and people not following basic traffic laws. And so, well, my first thought to that is just well, you just shouldn't drive over the speed limit. I know that that's not what everybody does. But in addition to offering this meeting as a place for people to come and voice those sort of concerns. Angela, I'm sorry, I definitely shared your email address. So if you got bombarded on one day last week, you're welcome, or I'm sorry. But it just got me thinking about some other work that this committee has done in the past, particularly around complete streets policy. And once upon a time, we did some work around like crosswalk policy. So taking a look at when somebody says, hey, can you put a crosswalk here? How does the town respond to that? And so I just wondered if anyone else ever hears these same kind of issues by their neighbors or friends, like, hey, people are driving really fast on my road and I don't feel safe with my kids playing in the front yard or what have you. And if so, that potentially we could think about putting together or looking at other resources, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel here. There's a lot of people that have done a lot of work to this end, but something like a toolkit or a one-pager that offers suggestions for people like that beyond just calling the police department, asking for them to patrol more and asking for, you know, stop signs. This is my line of work, so I know what that long list of toolbox options is, but most people don't know that, and or they may think that like putting a stop sign in somewhere is really that's the ticket, that's really going to fix all these problems, and that there are processes that go along with all of that. So I don't really have like a pointed directive or anything, but it's just something that's come up a couple times recently. And I do think there are certain things, you know, very simple things that a lot of people can do to help decrease speeding in their own neighborhoods that they might think wouldn't make a big difference, but if everybody did them, they actually would make a big difference. So, you know, I don't know if it's outlining a few things like that, and then if someone tries those, then they can kind of come to like another level of options or criteria, and it might help both the public and this committee and town staff kind of not weed out, that sounds bad, but you know, prioritize, I guess. If we had an issue that went through all of those kind of things and then came to us and someone is like, we have tried everything, and then maybe that's that's like a fuller traffic study or something like that would be appropriate.
Yeah, I guess I appreciate you bringing this up, Jen, because it is good to I guess kind of share our process maybe with this group, so you guys can be an advocate for kind of how this works, because as I know Roger points out, we do a lot of things probably that look like behind the scene, not intending to. We just kind of do our job, right? We're just doing our job and not realizing that we should be shouting it from the rooftops. Here's all the things that we're doing, right? But to that point, Jen, I know myself, the police department, and public works, those three really, engineering, police, and public works, get a lot of concerns voiced with lots of different things. I will say the number one thing starts with speeding, and it's more around, we get the requests for changing speed limits. That's, I would say, probably the number one request we get is, can you change my road to a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit, which would be every road in town would be 25 miles an hour. But I think what we've done since I've been here is we formed what I call our traffic safety committee, and it's really the three entities, so that we have all different perspectives we kind of bring to the table with a request. And to your point, this committee has formulated some policies that have been put in place that are extremely helpful for that process, which would, like you said, the complete streets policy, but the crosswalk, I get a lot of requests for crosswalks. And other one is street lights. It's too dark, you know, and safety is in relationship to transportation. And so it's helpful for the three of us. It's Deputy Chief John O'Malley, Mike Shaw, the Public Works Director, and myself meet. It seems to be as needed, but it ends up being probably every other month because we'll come together with our lists. And I will say DOT dictates the speed limits. And one of the things that is we do a lot of education, the three of us, and we have one voice, which I think is very important. We coordinate and get back to the resident on, as to your point, with information about adding a stop sign does not mean that necessarily increase safety. And in some cases might create a high crash location because people are then getting rear-ended when you don't know if someone's stopping or not stopping. I was horrified to stand out in front of Pleasant Hill Road and Highland one day with a resident and watching people go right through a stop sign. And that's a scary, that's a busy intersection. So so one of the things I hear from the police a lot is more signs don't also make you safe, because if they saw the stop sign, there's no way you did not know that you're supposed to stop at that stop sign, right? So adding more signs are not always the answer too. And so like you said, it's more about education around that. So we try to do a lot of that. And there's also a lot of good requests. We were just talking, we met the other day, we are putting in a new crosswalk. We'll be going in on Pine Point Road because we have now a whole application. We review it through, like I said, all the different angles to make sure we don't have a crosswalk every 10 feet, because then you might as well just paint the whole road. And then where are you safe? People step into crosswalks thinking they're safe when it just becomes kind of oblivious to the drivers, right? If they're just everywhere, it needs to mean something. And that's where you get into.
In case you don't know what that looks like, you can just take a ride down Commercial Street in Portland.
Right, everything's a crosswalk.
So frustrating.
Yep. So so we do have that, and I think that's a really good point about putting maybe a packet information, and to Roger's point, it was maybe getting more information on the website. So again, we have the resource now. We have a communications kind of person that can help make it look good, right? It's like no one wants to read a boring engineer's statement or something the police department just kind of said, here's why things are safe or not safe, right? So it's to make it look appealing to the eye and people want to see something, right? And like, okay, this makes sense. And so I think there is an opportunity to do something like that, I guess. But I did want to point out to this group that we do have a process in place, which I think has been working pretty well. And we've been doing a lot of good work through that. And we have added signs and we have added crosswalks. And there's a lot of ones that we don't add. It really just depends on the situation, because each situation is different. And to your other point was, sorry, it was, we had some instances like speeding around corners and just adding little things like we added about 25 feet of curb. I had Public Works come out, we worked it out, we laid it out, and you can't take that corner at those high speeds. It forced people to slow down. Or to add, to your point, everyone adding, if you guys all get in the neighborhood and add street trees in the front of your house, it's the perception that things are closer or tighter slows traffic down. There's lots of things like that that can happen. And so I have been working with Public Works and the police department to try to implement.
Yeah, the locust tree comes and cuts the trees down there.
Well, it can't be near the wires. We've learned that, right? The hard way. I'm sorry, Alan, I kept going there for a while.
All right. I just kind of, in conjunction with what Jennifer was saying, she was talking about speeding. The thing that I hear all the time is people running red lights. I guess my question to you is this. I know that in other places that I have been through, and I'm trying to think if it was here in the States or whether or not it was overseas or not, but is there any restriction for us to install cameras which mail tickets to people for running red lights in an effort to try to curb some of that? I mean, is that even a possibility, or is that something that you just can't do?
It's my understanding that it's not legal in the state of Maine. So it might
Okay.
be in other states. That's a specific, and it does come up every few years or so, or maybe every decade. And it is squashed pretty quickly, I would say, in the state.
We
All right,
really
so go
like
to my
our privacy.
representative.
Yeah, it's the big brother, right?
Well, but we don't think there's cameras, but maybe there are cameras.
There
Well,
are cameras.
There are.
Yes, we do use them for video detection. So they're cameras and that I guess technically could be, but I don't think you can in a court of law. You can't. It's not legal to use those in those ways.
I'll tell you
No,
that I was at Oak Hill Corner today, Oak Hill and Black Point, and I was going southbound on 1. And when the light turned red, there were 4 vehicles. After the light turned red, that went through the intersection. 4.
That's true. I've noticed that too. The Gorham Road southbound,
Approach?
no. The Gorham Road approach towards, so if you're going from Gorham Road across Route 1 to Black Point Road, it has a very short green time.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure it's on purpose because we want the green time somewhere else. But I think I've noticed the same thing too, Alan, and I think it results in frustration. So if you've already waited 2 cycles or 3 cycles, a lot of people are just like, I'm out of here. I'm gonna go.
Yeah. The only thing I can tell you is that if you're first in line at a light, you
go.
make sure you don't take off when the light turns green.
Yeah.
Better make sure you look in all directions before you move. Because people are, it's brutal.
Well, and
One resource I would point out to Jennifer's point and to Roger's is the town newsletter. A lot of people get it, and just putting a little blurb in there saying, are you experiencing speeding in your neighborhood? You might want to consider talking about this. Have you noticed that there are people running the red lights at the intersection of, at Oak Hill? You might want to be aware that that's a dangerous situation, just as kind of a heads up, not that it necessarily has long-term ramifications, but at least it raises the awareness. I don't know what the penetration is in the town for receiving the newsletter. I know a lot of people in my neighborhood get it. So it is something that we read and pay attention to.
I know.
I wanted to bring up something Jennifer mentioned, and you did, Angela, regarding signage in Pleasant Hill Road and Highland Avenue. Now, when I was a young man getting my license, I seem to recall there was a rule that if 2 cars entered the intersection at the same time, the car on the right had the right of way. They actually there was a terminology for that, and I don't recall what it is. But I see a lot of times cars come to that intersection and they don't know what to do, and some go when they shouldn't go. And so that would be a good example where if there was a sign, some kind of signage saying whatever that terminology is, right, car on the right has the right of way or something like that.
Roger,
Yeah,
the right of way, Roger, is for he who takes it.
Yeah.
That's not the rule, but it's the unwritten rule.
Yeah.
It's the same with yield signs when people are entering like 295.
Yeah.
Nobody
ever stops. They just go.
Yeah.
And I will say, I was going to mention that because that's still in front of the council, our CIP plan for this year, but it is adaptive traffic signals on Route 1, which in this case would be the first phase, Municipal Drive through Oak Hill up to the Main Med campus. What is that? Green Acres. One of the things with adaptive traffic signals, which is happening at Dunstan, is people get used to also the pattern, right? You get used to, okay, once Gorham Road goes, I'm next. Or you're waiting for that light, right? So you're jumping on it. With adaptive traffic signal, it truly is a smart signal. So it's based on what it sees for line queued cars, right? So it's going to jump around. And so we did put up signage, signs up at Dunstan, and we did a newsletter ahead of that, and we did some public outreach to try to get people to understand that you truly do need to wait for a green light, right? Because you don't know that you're getting the next green light. And so that, again, there's going to be a learning curve as we start going down this path of looking at Route 1 in the same way, is that people get used to these patterns, and there's going to be a little bit of time to get used to that. And then to Alan's point, perhaps people might be more cautious because, I don't know if I'm next or not, right? So you have to actually look at the light, know whether you're going or not, right? So hopefully we will get there, and that we'll see that improvement. Obviously, the whole point is to eliminate some of that idle time along Route 1, and that you can go through consistently along the main arterial, which means also there's education around if you're on a side street, like if I'm sitting at Municipal Drive, I'm going to wait longer. That's just how that's going to function. And so there is a lot of education around that for motorists.
And Angela, I have a couple of questions for you. One is the town prepared with the appropriate planning in case all of a sudden they have access to some federal infrastructure funds?
Yeah, we went over it last time, Roger. As far as transportation projects, I went over with you guys for the CARES Act funds. That's federal dollars that might be coming through. That was in that meeting. You should read the meeting minutes again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's
No, I'm thinking of like
we're trying to line things up so that as things
Yeah.
become available, we can jump on it. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm
that.
thinking like on Gorham Road. I mean, I know we're going to be doing that in phases, but all of a sudden, if there's some money, maybe we could compress that some,
So that's where we said, looking in a regional basis, we've been prioritizing, as well as a local basis prioritizing. And I know there's a big, but actually, like you said, the next push on Gorham Road is coming. This summer is going to be the gas company and the sewer lines being redone. That's really a bottleneck through that very narrow corridor through there, that next phase from Maple to the Nonesuch River. We're going to follow that, hopefully, if we get funding through council for our capital plan. But after that, I think we're finding there's going to be a fatigue from the residents on that corridor, because that was a pretty big lift, phase 1, and a lot of disruption for the commuters as well as the residents in that area. So here's the next piece. It's a big lift. So that's why the next thing we talked about was maybe trying to prioritize the East Grand Ave section. I think if is a big
that'll be fun.
funding. Well, it's a big cost, right? And that's something that we cannot lift on our own on a local level. So to your point, is trying to prioritize.
Sure.
And there's a lot of competing interests for one thing, but then also to say we need to spread it around as well, right? So so we don't overload residents in one corridor. There's just like enough of construction. Right?
The other question I had for you is I happened to be on Spurwink today, down by Acon, and you know where the Higgins Beach Market is?
I was down there today too. You saw Public Works down there.
Were you on the tractor?
No, I was not. I wasn't wearing the right shoes today for that, but.
What are they doing down there? Are they actually putting in the sidewalk?
Yes. So this is part of actually the planning board approval
I wondered that too.
for the Meadows, which is Piper Shore's new project on Durago Drive. Part of that was paying towards the sidewalk. You know, we talk about our in lieu fee sidewalk.
Okay, so that was it. Okay, because it's going in the opposite direction from the Piper Shores. It's going from the market towards Cape Elizabeth in that direction.
Talked about how where it makes sense prioritizing where people are walking, right? So there's a whole neighborhood there, and trying to get, there is a flashing beacon that crosses right at the market.
Yeah.
But there's no sidewalks leading to that on that side.
Right, yeah.
specifically getting to the market, right? So it was connecting, it's a very short sidewalk to try to connect that neighborhood so it's a pretty efficient project, at lower cost, and using some of those multimodal funds that Piper Shores had put in as one entity that put in towards that. So that's
Okay.
enabled the public works crew to do that in-house, which is obviously at a cost savings as well to do that, because it's a pretty minor project as far as that goes. Mhm.
Okay,
The other side of that, Roger, is Dorado Drive.
yeah,
That's where the Meadows is going in for Piper Shores.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But there's no sidewalk from the marketplace up to there.
No, there is not.
No, and that was talked about at planning board too, is they were providing a trail crossing and actually be able to go through the Piper Shores campus to get down towards,
Yeah,
to
right, yeah.
get towards the beach, right? That was
Yeah.
kind of that conversation that was had there.
But if they want to go to the market, they have to get in their vehicle.
Or their shuttle bus, right? I think they're going to be shuttling back and forth between their two campuses as well, so.
Yeah,
I've tried to figure out why the Piper Shores shuttle bus comes through Eastern Village twice a week.
Really?
by the way, Angela, did you also know that at the Scarborough Beach, the state park, they're expanding the parking lot?
I have not seen that.
But Portia, I can
Oh,
answer
you mean
your
across the
question.
street, or?
Huh? No,
Across-
right, the existing parking lot, right by Black Point Road.
Yep.
I believe they were in there cutting and
Okay.
de-stumping and everything. So I assume it's only because they're expanding the parking.
Okay, I will look into that.
I hope they don't do anything wrong.
Alan?
Yeah, Portia, I can answer your question. And because of the width of the roads and because of cars parking here, there, and everywhere along the roads, the bus supervisor actually uses that as a training ground to train new drivers. Because she figures that if they can drive through there safely, they can drive anywhere. That's a fact. And I can only tell you that because I am one of the people who drive Piper Shores buses.
Well, that's good to know, because we've been curious why it comes through here so frequently.
That's one of her training routes. She takes the new drivers on.
Okay.
Interesting. All right, is there any other comments? It's about 8 now. Yep.
I've got one, Angela. It's the one I started the meeting with.
Oh, yes. You were asking, I don't know if everybody was on yet. Alan was asking about future meetings, whether there are going to be in person or continue to be remote. And the guidance that I have gotten is right now, we are remote, obviously, tonight. It's something that we can discuss in each committee. If a committee it wants to continue to meet remotely, I think there's some committees that are finding that there's some early morning meetings, or again, night meetings that are more convenient to do it in this setting, then we can continue that for at least the time being. I think guidance is going to change, right? So we can keep having the conversation. If you guys are in favor of meeting in person, we can accommodate that as well. It's really, we're supposed to be gauging the members to see what your comfort level is, or like I said, the convenience level at this point.
Is this meeting that we're having tonight on channel 1302 right now?
No. So right now, transportation and sustainability is another committee that some of these smaller committees, we don't live stream right now. We can, if we're going to continue this path, that might be an option. But right now I'm recording it and it will go up on the website so that others can watch it after. We do post the link So on our homepage, as well as on the agenda, so that the members of the public can join our meeting at the time. So it is open to the public, and anybody can join these meetings, but it's not live streamed to necessarily watch at this time.
Because I'm not crazy about the Zoom meetings. I'm getting tired of them, but
Mhm.
the thing is, with our other meetings in the manager's office, those are not recorded.
Correct.
And,
That's true.
and so consequently, I mean, we don't become famous, you know?
Good.
That's true. I mean, for others that weren't part of it, these smaller committees weren't typically televised.
But the thing is, this committee affects a lot of people in town.
I'm sure all the committees think that way too, yes.
Yeah, but I'm amazed. I'm amazed at how much this committee does. Because you talk to most people, they'll say the biggest issue in town is traffic.
I would agree with that. Yep. So
I
what is your comfort like? Because you'll probably hear it again tomorrow morning, Alan, right? You'll have a conversation with Jay. We'll be saying the same thing with the long range planners.
Right. The only reason why I ask is I normally summer about 3 hours north of here.
Mhm.
So the July meeting, for example, obviously I would attend. If we're Zooming, I don't have an issue with that.
Mhm.
But I probably wouldn't drive for 6 hours to attend, an hour and a half long meeting here. So it's the only reason why I ask.
Well, we can still do
Obviously,
it.
love to, I don't know if
that's
you
an
can do a hybrid or not.
Yep. So we are working, that was something else that was brought up because council is currently doing hybrid meetings. And so that is an option. I think they have more staff to be able to do kind of behind the scenes to be able to make that all happen. And I know planning board did that once. It was a little clunky. And we need 3 staff members to pull it off. So that's a lot to try to do every committee meeting that way, but that was one of the options that we could look into. I think IT is working on making that easier, is my understanding. So by July, that might be definitely a more doable option, and that you could choose to either be in person or remote and have a sort of a hybrid meeting. But I was asked to try to get a gauge on this one way or the other from the group, in person or remote. And I guess the other thing with this committee, I know now we're meeting every other month and the next one being July, but I wanted to also point out that I think the next big topics coming up is really probably centered around the Downs. Their traffic movement permit is being finalized probably in the next, I'm going to say 2 weeks. 2 to 3 weeks. That is the largest traffic movement permit in the state of Maine. It's significant and it has significant work attached to it in the next 5 years as far as offsite mitigation goes. So I think it's really important that this group be in that loop and knowing what's going on and where those projects are, and really the scope of those as well as the timing of those, and the traffic impacts that come with a large project like this. And the planning board will be doing the lead on that. And I'm anticipating that in the month of June, we will be getting a submission from the Downs team, which would trigger a workshop of sorts, or at least a meeting exclusively dedicated to the Downs traffic. And I guess I'm going to suggest that we look at this group maybe using that as maybe one of our next meetings. So if that ends up being the end of June, then maybe that's when that happens. And at this point, planning board is remote. That is something that we were talking about, trying to figure that out as well. If that continues right now, the time being, that will continue to be remote. To your point, Alan, then I would try to encourage you guys to log into these Zoom meetings and participate in those planning board workshops, because I think the planning board is going to want to hear from this group. I think Jen is obviously in the biz, as she says.
I now feel bad about saying that because it's recorded.
but it's good that, and I think the planning board relies a lot on her expertise as a traffic engineer. I think they would love to hear from the rest of this group as well as the traffic experts, and having that background and some knowledge on some of the things we've done in town. So I know it's not non-answer, and I apologize, but I think it's going to change. And I think as soon as I hear the planning board schedule for what's happening and when they submit and when we can go over everything, I really want to get the two groups together. I would like to combine transportation in that process. And I think it's going to be a lot. So I'm going to ask this committee to maybe put the time in with that, which could be end of June, maybe beginning of July. And then maybe we take August off or the end of July, you know what I mean? So I kind of was hoping this group may be flexible with that next meeting. And I don't know what your thoughts are with that. So I'd let you guys kind of chime in what your thoughts are.
I think that makes all kinds of sense. I'm fine with that. And I will do whatever I can do in order to try to make sure I can get to that July 27th meeting. Just as a little bit different thought here as well, and thinking in terms of workshops, so that this committee knows, probably the biggest thing that long-range planning has in front of them right now is the 2021 comprehensive plan. That plan, don't quote me on this, but I anticipate the long-range planning committee sending that plan to town council around June 4th. And then shortly thereafter that, I would expect that there to be a workshop between long-range planning, the planning board, and the town council on the new comp plan. So you may want to be on the lookout for that. If you want to get some more of the inside on the comp plan. If you want to see it before that, there should be a copy right now on the town website.
There is.
So just something, I think it's about 190 pages long. A lot of information, little bit different kind of plan this year because it's not the traditional zoning and ordinance bound comp plan. There's a lot more information in there on things that we're trying to do regarding, preserving our marshes, preserving our waterways, preserving, multiple things across the town. So I suspect you'll see it's a much different comp plan than what you might have read in the past, if you've ever read one. So I encourage you to be on the lookout for that. And if you can take the time to join that meeting, I would encourage you to do that.
Just so you're aware too, Ellen, and I think Portia, just this committee, when we started that process, so now has it been 2 years? When it was Planapalooza? Trying to remember.
Oh my goodness, that was 2016.
It was in person. I know that.
Yeah.
But I know that's when we started with this group, and this committee provided a vision of Scarborough from the transportation aspect, and we had bulleted out our kind of vision and some of the missions that we saw that should be incorporated into the comp plan. We've also seen, I guess, a few renditions or drafts of the comp plan, and obviously I guess it was a year ago that this committee, I had provided some excerpts, so you didn't have to read the whole 150 pages that we kind of talked through with this group, talking about it. And I guess we had consensus from this group that what the long range planning committee had done captured that the vision kind of statements that this group had provided. So I think we were in supportive of the direction that the comp plan was going. But I think it's always worth revisiting if you guys have the time, and it is available on the website, and it is a final document, or not final, it's a final draft, right? Is that what you call it?
Yeah.
So if you want to take another read through, or others that haven't if you want to take another look, yeah. But I know a lot of work was done through this group to provide some of that input. So that I think was captured very well, or at least this group kind of chimed in with that. Again,
Actually,
a year ago.
I've actually read through the latest draft, and
Oh, good.
I think it's done really well.
Mhm.
And I would think most citizens would not have any problem going right through it. Very informative, and you know, it's easy to read. It's easy to follow. So
Good.
It's meant to be a coffee table book, Roger.
All right, so I will be providing you guys information then over, I think a lot is going to happen in the next month, it sounds like, between, as Alan said, workshops around comp plan, workshops around the downs, and trying to get you guys plugged in. The other aspect that Councilor Anderson brought up the last time is also plugging this group into the downtown committee, has a subcommittee for transportation. So I feel like around the downs, there's a lot of multiple things coming at it, all about traffic and transportation. And so it's good, I think, him and I had some conversations or emails back and forth about trying to coordinate that a little bit, right? Because we have this group, we have the planning board, we have the DOT, and now we have the downtown committee all talking about traffic from the downs. So it would really be good to kind of gel that together in some way. So I think he's going to try to also see how we can get plugged in maybe from that aspect too. And I think maybe this is the committee that could probably pull those pieces all together. I mean, as long as we're in the know with all of these. So, so look for lots of emails from me, because I will, I feel like things haven't solidified yet on, like, as Alan said, we have a certain dates that seem to keep moving. So, but as I know, you will know. And that's, I guess, best I could do.
you all set?
I am all set. Is there anything else?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, I will, you'll hear from me soon.
Okay.
Thanks.
Don't forget the
Thanks,
minutes.
everyone. Nice to meet you, Portia.
Nice to meet you all.
Yeah.
Well, some of you.
Bye.
Right.